Hello, welcome to Drugs Unwrapped with me, Rob. Today I'm joined with, oh my days. Okay,
Go on,
Rob.
right.
Hello,
Fucking
welcome
hell.
to Drugs Unwrapped, and today standing in for Rob is Jamie. Welcome. Unfortunately, Rob has lost the ability to talk.
Pretty much, yeah. Given I cannot speak today, and that was like take 5, we'll just crack on. Okay. Today I'm joined by Jamie and Danielle. Today's episode, we are asking what's it like to work in the drugs field. So to give a bit of a perspective on ultimately what it's like to work in this sector. So welcome both. Hope you are both all right. First of all, if we come to you, Danielle, to give a little bit of background. So how long have you worked in the drugs field for?
So I've been working in the drug field for about, I think it's like 7 to 8 years, around that sort of ball mark. But yeah, before that I've always sort of worked with young people, but specifically in the sort of drug and alcohol field, yeah, around sort of 7, 8 years. But yeah, working with young people then rather than working with adults.
Does it feel longer?
Yes, sometimes it does.
Yeah,
There's good and bad days where I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I've been here for like 50 years. But the thing is, when you're working in this field and working with young people, especially, I find that every day is different. Very rarely you come into work and you're like, oh, this is what's going to happen today. And then normally something will happen. You'll get a phone call or you'll get a new referral, and it just chucks like your routine completely out the window, which is great because it keeps you on your toes, and there's never a dull moment, to be honest. Yeah,
I think that's what a lot of people say, isn't it? Like every day is different in that, in terms of
Yeah.
those that work in this field.
Yeah,
Jamie, not to give your age away, but how long have you worked in the field for?
Well,
It's been quite a while.
Well, obviously, right. I've been in total. I've been working in the drugs field for about 22 years. So I started when I was 12. And yeah. So I started when I was 12, and it's been a bit of an uphill slog, obviously. But no, I've been working for about 22 years across other areas and whatnot. But Swansea specifically, I've been here, and I think it's next month the anniversary. I've been working in Swansea for about 17 years. So had a bit of a stint with Danielle down in Dyfed about 5 years ago, I think, for about 18 months. So that was
a bit of an eye opener for you, wasn't it, Jamie, when you came down here?
Just a bit.
bit rural in comparison to the work in the big smoke.
Yeah. Hey, but I learned loads though. So I was pleased with the sabbatical almost that it was, whatever it was called. But no, it was a good experience. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was funny.
Enjoyed it.
Good crack.
And I've been November marks 13 years for me.
13 years,
which is absolutely mad. So Jamie, you were my first manager, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You took a punt on me when I was young and naive, when I was also 12.
Poor you, Rob. How did you cope?
I don't know.
You came to an interview wearing a suit.
Did
you did?
I thought that's what you did. I thought that's what you did.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I was like 23 years old, going for like my first proper job. That wasn't in a bar or a cafe or selling ice cream. And I thought that's what you did. I thought you rocked up in a suit. And I remember I came to Swansea on the train.
Yeah.
Came the night before. I watched the In-Betweeners because it was on Channel 4. That was still going then. And absolutely chucked it down. And I got lost in Swansea. Yeah. So I rocked up for the interview, and I think you made me wait as well.
Yeah.
For an answer.
Hey, standard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Still, old habits die hard. So no.
Keeping you on your toes. Keeping you on your toes, yours. But you must have done all right wearing a suit, because this many years later.
Yeah, the suit was nailed it for me.
Absolutely, yeah. But yeah. So Dan, what's the reaction you tend to get then when you say to people, "Oh, I work in the drugs field"? Like, are there common things that people tend to say? I ask you this because when I often tend to to tell people who I don't know, and they ask, what I do for a living. I say, I work at, in a drug and alcohol charity or treatment, and more often than not, most people tend to go, "Oh, you must see some sights," you know. What kind of things do you? Are there common themes that you tend to get when people react to what you tell them?
I think it depends. When I first, because obviously, like over the years, I think people's attitudes and views on people who use substances has changed. So I think initially when I first started doing it, people were like, "Oh my God, like how do you work in that field? That must be like really challenging. It must be really stressful." But I think one of the most common themes is just like, how do you switch off from that type of work? Because not all the young people I work with, but a fair few of them come from quite intense backgrounds, have experienced quite a lot of traumas, and like living in some situations that would be absolutely like unbelievable for some people to even like wrap their heads around. And even though I've been in the service for a fair amount of time, every now and again, even though I've developed a bit of a thicker skin in terms of listening to, secondary trauma or just things that these young people have been exposed to, every now and again, it is harder to switch off when, if I was, when I was younger, I used to do a lot of waitressing and stuff like that, cleaning, you kind of just come home and you're able to just like not think about work. But every now and again, and I think as a parent as well, I come home and it's harder to switch off because you just really, your heart really like goes out to these young people that are really struggling. But yeah, it can be quite a controversial topic as well with some people. But as the years have progressed, I get that it's a less controversial, like, oh my God, I could never work with people like that, sort of thing. I don't really get that anymore, where initially, people would maybe be quite blinkered to people who would be like really suffering or struggling with addiction and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it does vary for sure.
Jamie, do you see anything similar really in terms of when you share your line of work?
Not really, because I'm a bit of a loner, so don't get this.
Well, we're not talking about your personal life now.
Oh, right, sorry, right, okay. So basically, I've always struggled in like explaining what I do, because like I think I've had so many conversations over the years, and I think I agree with what Danielle's saying. Is like more recently, I think people get it and people have a bit more understanding for whatever reasons. People have changed and whatnot. But like, I think I always do it like in a way of like bring a bit of joviality into it, like, and go, "What do you do?" "I do drugs." And that always tends to bring a bit of a laugh and a smile. And it also reminds you of the time when my I think it was my daughter in school actually said, when the teacher says, what does your mum and your dad do for work? And my daughter said, "My dad does drugs," having heard that conversation elsewhere. So we didn't have a visit from social services or anything, fortunately. No. But it was shared in parents' evening. Which gave me the opportunity to put a bit more of an explanation behind it. But no, I think it's always a good like conversational starter, because people are often quite fascinating, and I always find it quite bizarre when, say, for instance, if you ever get invited to a party, I have done sometimes,
once or twice,
once maybe, yeah, and a wedding here and there over the years, and like you could be sat around a table and there's a variety of different, should we say, people's like occupations, but the drugs worker field always seems to generate the most conversation, and sustains the conversation for a lot longer. And it's out of a lot of things, like from people just being really inquisitive about how do you work in that, what do you do, what kind of people that you come across, what walks of life are they coming into services. A lot of people, which I'm not surprised at all, are either coming into it as well, conversations wise, like about personal experience or family members and things like that. So it does really resonate with people. And I think like for those people that I often speak to, they'd often say, oh, I'd really love to kind of, work in that field, or kind of like to spend a day in your shoes just to see what it's like and meeting the people that you meet and things like that. So it's a real good, I don't know, conversation and opener and stuff. So I kind of like, I don't know, yeah, you kind of then, it hits home the work that we actually do, and how we do interact with the general public, and how people are quite fascinated. You think about all the songs that are written under the influence about drugs, films, documentaries, TV series, and everything as well. I find that people were related to that as well. What they read in the newspapers, what they saw on social media, what the news reports were bringing out, and what kind of Netflix series they're watching, how fascinated they are about like how drugs across the globe is fascinating. And I think like you can see why then, can't you? Like why it generates so much discussion and how people have got a different opinion on it. And I'm quite surprised. I'm quite surprised as well about people's opinions on drugs as well. I don't often come across anyone who's quite hardline kind of anti-drugs. And maybe that's because of the social circles that we keep and that. And as I said, I don't often get the opportunity to socialize. So, but no, I think it's just interesting, like how you see the different responses. But most of the time, it's really, really positive, which is always nice.
Yeah, and I think looking at some of the documentaries that have come out now in terms of certain substances being used or trials being used in terms of looking at how drugs can sort of help people who suffer with like particular types of mental health problems. So that's something that always comes up in topic as well. There's been I think a couple of documentaries online that look at specifically hallucinogenic drugs like psilocybin. I think MDMA was in that actually as well. So it's like looking at how they can be trialed, and some of these trials have been shown as well. So that always comes up in quite a lot of people. It's like, oh, have you seen this documentary on Netflix about this guy? He was chronically depressed. He took a load of mushrooms and then he was fixed. But there's a lot more to it than that. But it's definitely one of those things that tends to come up. And obviously, like for us in drug services, it's a really interesting topic. The more research that is going into these different types of programs and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely really interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just becoming more like socially acceptable, isn't it? To like even just talk about like these kind of things, maybe more so than maybe like 10 years ago, so to speak.
Yeah,
so like,
definitely.
With that, I always remember in terms of like, when I was a young person's worker, like I would go to the schools to do like the workshops, and this was at the start of my career really within this field. And I always thought...
Did you wear a suit though, Rob, when you went in? It's okay if you did. There's no judgment here.
He did wear a suit. He did wear a suit. We have to have a word.
Yeah,
Rob, no ties, no dicky toes. Sorry.
I would have loved to have done that actually. See what the reaction would have been. Yeah. But no, like you were sat in like the reception area with other professionals who were going in to do workshops on their like specialism, so to speak. So you'd have someone next to you who would gonna go in and do like say sexual education, which I thought, all my days I could not do that, and talk about that in front of kids, and I still wouldn't be able to do that now, and more often than not, the person who was doing that ended up to be my wife. You had someone there who potentially was going to talk about like youth homelessness, and I thought, that's a bit deep. With that, you potentially had like a copper in there who obviously is going to talk about like online safety, and I thought, that's pretty boring, with that. I always used to think like in those situations I was the absolute business, because I had my drugs box and I had my alcohol like beer goggles, and I thought, this is what kids want to talk about, this is what kids want to hear about. And I always thought, what, I'm cool. It never turned out to be that way, and it never has been, but I always thought, working in the drugs field and talking about drugs, was always kind of like probably one of the cooler professions that you could do.
Yeah,
with
definitely.
that, because like you said, James, you know, it opens those conversations up, doesn't it? And you kind of, I find myself, for example, like talking with my mates over a pint or two, you know, and the conversation's gone on to about how we should legalize all drugs, you know, and that stemmed literally from like what we do. And I always remember as well, like talking to a mate of a mate actually, and I think as a group of us, we just done like a tough mudder in Manchester. So yeah, we were actually, you know, having a pint afterwards to warm ourselves up, because we had to go into the canal in the middle of November as part of it. And we were like chatting about what people were doing, and one of them, he was like, "Oh, I'm a plumber, you know, and I see all sorts, you know, in my job." And I always remember there was this story that he said that he'd gone to do a job at an old lady's house. She was in her 70s. She lived alone, and he had to go into the airing cupboard, and he found let's just say toys for sexual pleasure in between the bath towels in the airing cupboard. And I always remember then, you know, I kind of like was talking about what I do, and I think at the time I was the trainer, so I used to carry basically a bag of paraphernalia on me at all time. It was always in the boot of my car, you know, and I was always a little bit like nervous if I was ever to stop by the police, because I had bongs and crack pipes and needles and all sorts in the boot of my car that just stayed there, you know. It was just easier just to keep it. And I always remember, like, on my days, I thought, you know, this guy was like, I always thought my job was quite cool, but that, yeah, that's different level from that as well.
Yeah. I think when you go into schools and stuff, and that is generally like one of the topics that the young people, they love talking about drugs and alcohol, even to this day, because, you know, in school it is still quite a taboo subject, maybe not as much as what it has been. But sometimes when I go into schools, so because I cover 2 counties and they're both very rural, and even certain towns in different counties, like the young people are very different, depending on what like sort of communities they're from, if they're like from farming communities, or, you know, if the school's in more of a town than like a rural village on the top of a mountain somewhere, you know. But yeah, it is a very, very it's quite cool. It's quite a trendy topic for the young people to talk about. And when we've had sessions with young people, sometimes normally a teacher will come around with the class just to make sure the young people are behaving. But sometimes I will ask the teachers if they mind like just going out of the class while I'm delivering the session, just because it gives the young people that space to talk about things in a bit more of an open way, because I think a lot of them are quite scared about the consequences if they were to ask a question about, you know, weed or, you know, some other drugs. You know, sometimes they feel, I guess it can be just a bit of a barrier for them. But I remember in some schools as well, when you've got your break and you walk in around the school, even though the teacher's like, oh, come and sit in the staff room and have your lunch, I'm like, no, I'm going to go and sit in the canteen with the kids. So I'm just sat there, and like a lot of the kids come up to me and say, oh yeah, I love your sessions, they're really cool. Do you know those drug boxes? Have they got real drugs in them? And I'm like, oh yeah, they got real drugs in them. And they look at me and it's like, no, that would still be illegal, guys. They're not, you know, they're not real drugs. They're just like pretend ones. But yeah, my boot is full of all sorts of paraphernalia and stuff all the time. Sometimes I forget to take them out, so I go shopping or like give my nan a lift to go to the shop. She's like, oh, what's all this? I'm like pulling it all out. I was like, oh, it's just what I do in my work, nan. But yeah, for her, she's from a completely different generation altogether, so it's like, you know, it's completely mind-boggling for her that, you know, I go into school to educate the kids about drugs and alcohol sort of thing, you know. But yeah, it's funny.
I just like I think the journey on through like a career in drugs and alcohol has been so like kind of like emotive and kind of different and ever changing for myself. I think like the amount of funny scenarios that I kind of like found myself in with other colleagues, near misses as well, you know, etc., because we've been in some tricky situations throughout the years. But the people that we work with, and that's, you know, the people that we work directly with, and also other people from other services that we collaborate with. It's brought a good time to a lot of kind of like difficult and challenging periods, and I think maybe that's why, think about us here now, how long we've been in the field of this area of work for. I think it kind of shows that there's, it's one that people do very much kind of stick around in and enjoy. And I think getting like people's ideas and understandings of what a day to day, like, because I find that's one of the questions I get asked a lot in interviews. So, when you're doing an interview, what does a typical day look at? Like, I think it's a really good question to ask, but the answer to it is very difficult from our perspective, because it's like, well, where do I start? And like, the scenarios you just given now, it's like berserk. And I do like to give a good anecdote or something, comedic that has happened or occurred. And I don't know. One of my favorites one is having worked in a festival and just leaving the site and fortunately or unfortunately being handed the full contents of the amnesty bin for the full weekend, and kind of like looking at it going, what do you want me to do with this? And they were like, well, do you want it to get it tested? And I was like, yeah, okay. But forgetting that I had the contents on, not to self-incriminate you, but having all the contents and finding it conveniently, thought I won't leave it on display, but I'll put it in my I'll put it in my sun visor so it's out of the way. But forgetting about it, and driving around with potential Class A's wasn't a good look until one day driving from work, from the office, and pulling down my sun visor, and the whole contents falling into my lap. Conveniently, it was not so far away from the local police central station, which I was thought, maybe I need to pop in there and give them over to the officers there. And I had quite an interesting look, and I was told when I came in and said, "Oh, I've got these. They need to be tested. I need to shoot off." And I was told, "No, you stay there, please." And then I had to kind of like give the story of where I was coming from, where they'd been and everything. So, but a bit of a plug there for Wedding Horse and the drug testing. But no, they were very good, and they did take the substances, a whole variety of different substances, whole variety of different tablets, different colors and different imprints on them. So it was a good haul, should we say there. But that's just one of many, kind of like, I can laugh back at it now, but I could be sitting behind bars now. But
I was going to ask you, how long were you in a cell for?
Yeah. This time I wasn't, so it wasn't too bad at all. It wasn't too bad at all.
I'm guessing though, if you do get asked those questions in the interviews, what's a typical day look like? I assume handling illegal drugs isn't necessarily something that happens too often. No,
not too often. No. Yeah, but we get to work with people who are using drugs daily, and will sometimes cite you on the substances that they may be coming across, because of now, not to go off on a tangent about drugs, but the world of drug use has changed dramatically. The landscape has changed. So, drugs, old traditional drugs, being replaced by synthetic drugs, whether they be prescription meds or anything like that. And I think people are generally concerned who use these substances are now bringing them out and saying, look at these, what you thought us. You are getting first-hand experience to maybe some people in law enforcement wouldn't get the opportunity to see some of the drugs and what they look like in a first-hand situation. So we're quite privy to the insights of someone who's a drug user, shall we say, and what that landscape looks like now. So it's fascinating, I think. And I think, it's not often that people would share that information with you, which obviously can put you in a compromising situation. But obviously, we were from a harm reduction perspective, so we do advise them on what they can do. This is me covering my back now. So obviously, we would give them the appropriate information in relation to that, but also can give the harm reduction information as well. So it is. But some of the characters that I've met, like people coming in for the door. I was only saying the other day, I was working in the needle exchange, and it's just great when you meet people and the conversations that they generate. And I learn stuff every day, and that for me is really important. Never to lose that aspect of, like, meeting the people, being front facing, learning from. I'm the same with young people as well. When I get the opportunity to like kind of work with the young person service and hear what's going on and see how things have developed in the 20 years that I've been working, and seeing how things have changed and cultures and youth cultures, subcultures and all that. It's always a learning curve for me. Always.
Do any particular people stand out for you, James, over the years?
Oh my God, there's so many which have, like, we've had some good times and really challenging times as well. But there are a few individuals that I can honestly say sometimes when I see them around as adults today, I am really surprised about how well they've done, considering the traumas that they've experienced, and what they've managed to achieve has been absolutely amazing. So it's fantastic to see the end product of just some of the work that we just glanced upon, because you got to remember, like, your credit goes to the guys and the situations that they found themselves in, how they would survive. Okay, it was a bit tricky, and there was some concerns there, but they when they meet you in the street and they're so appreciative of what you did for them, and like, as I said, I remind them all the time, I did nothing. I was just there for you, and just did my bit, and kind of has helped you, did this, did that. But I said, you did all that work, and you've done, you've got your family, you've got your partners, yeah, and all those kind of things. It's just amazing to kind of see. You also got the flip side to that, then, where you've got people who are like, maybe are no longer with us, and have, or still very much dealing with that, with what's going on in their life. And one way of that is by using drugs and alcohol. But no, there are a lot of characters that we still see. They still pop in, and that's amazing. They still pop in and they still ask for me. Still come in and say, "Is Jamie still here? Is he still work? Yeah, yeah." And if I'm here, the guys will either ring up and I'll come down, and it's really nice, isn't it? And it's nice that you stand out in their memory and stuff like that. So I'm really appreciative when someone does pop in. And it's weird as well, because I remember them as children, young people. And I'm standing there in front of me, there's like full-grown adults, and I'm like, whoa, make me feel old. I know I am old, but yeah.
I was just gonna say, it's definitely the same. There are some like really funny times, but there's some like really tough times as well. When you get a phone call from a parent because the children have been taken to hospital, and the paramedics or the people in A&E are telling them, like, you need to prepare yourself for the worst. And as a parent, hearing that from another parent is like, it really pulls at the heartstrings. And I think we are only human at the end of the day, so that can be like really, really triggering, and just quite difficult situations. But when working with like young people, a lot of the work is just about planting the seed and just literally just touching on things. Sometimes we get referrals through, or we work with certain professionals that maybe are not so educated around like the work that we do, and they expect us to maybe have some sort of magic wand, so like make the young people stop using the whatever it is that they're using or whatever. But the reality is that is not what we're here to do. It is just about planting those seeds and helping them to understand the possible consequences and the long-term effects that these substances can have. But yeah, there are some funnier moments, and I think this one time we took a group of young people out surfing, because we do sort of diversionary activities with young people, like helping them to see how you can do different activities and things like that to help like distract yourself, which is good for your well-being and that kind of thing. And this one lad, bless him, so we all had wetsuits to put on, and this one lad went to go and put his wetsuit on. He came back out, and it was one of those wetsuits that you just there's not a zip at the back, you just have to climb in through the neck, and so he came out, and bless him, he had put the wetsuit on back to front. So the surf instructor was like, "Look, mate, you put it on the wrong way." He was just like, "Oh, bloody hell." And this young person was like over 6 foot. He was a big lad, and you could tell he was sweating because they're really hard to put on. So he went back, came back out. He'd put it on the right way, but inside out. And the surf instructor was like, "Oh mate, you've got it. You need," and he was like trying to show him. And honestly, I think it took him so many times to like try and put it on. And towards the end, he was like really frustrated of like putting this wetsuit on and off so many times. And he was like, "I thought this was supposed to be relaxing. I'm just really fucking stressed out." It was just comedy, absolute comedy. And as well, like going into schools and seeing young people in the sort of workshop sessions. I remember I was in this one school, a very rural school, and the young people there are relatively sheltered in comparison to say some of the schools in cities and things like that. And the topic of the workshop that we were delivering was substance use and sexual consent. So we're obviously like doing some education around that. And this one lad, and he, I think the group, they were like year nines, but he looked, very, very young for his age. He was a dirty little lad. And he was like, miss. And I was like, yeah. And then he was like, so what if you pull a girl, right? And she gives you consent and you're having sex with her, but then she falls asleep. And then all the other kids in the class started laughing. I was just like, in any other context, obviously this is quite a serious topic. It's a fantastic question to ask. So I was like trying to keep it together. I was like, that's a really great question. I was like, well, first things first, you definitely stop because obviously they're unconscious, so the consent is gone. But yeah, towards the end of that session, it was just everybody was in fits of giggles. But sometimes it's nice to have that bit of that comedy aspect to things that can be quite serious, because I think for young people as well, they're going to remember that more. But yeah, there's things that are stressful and quite difficult to deal with and really intense situations, but these little happier funny moments do just it balances the negatives off a bit. So yeah, funny
I guess
times.
questions like that you're not going to really get in any other kind of environment, are you?
No.
And I guess there's lots of other kind of similar questions that I'm sure all of us could probably kind of like recall. I always remember in terms of like, again, he was the first young person I ever met when I first started as a young person's worker back in 2010 it was, and he'd just come out of prison. And very quickly the rapport really, I think, not just between myself and him, but all the workers, and obviously there were more established workers, Jamie included, but it was really evident that with this one person, he must have been about 16, 17, and it was really evident that it was a relationship that was based on taking the mick out of one another. It was pretty much that, and I think that kind of continued, into his adulthood, and unfortunately he's no longer with us. It is one of kind of more the sad kind of tragic cases, but it very quickly I realized that actually this job was all about people skills, and it was all about just communicating with people, and like you said, both of you, when people make changes, it's not, ultimately it's down to that individual who's done it. And as a service, we provide that platform, we provide that kind of foundation for those people to be able to ultimately make those changes and kind of achieve those goals that they look for. And obviously, some people do, and some kind of situations other people don't from that. But to be able to provide that kind of like listening ear and that kind of that lack of judgment which they probably face in other aspects of their life, I think is absolutely pivotal really, with it. Would you say, in terms of both of you, like, have there been times from an honest and frank perspective where actually it has been very emotional for you both, and actually it has been quite heartbreaking for you?
Absolutely. When I first started this job, I think most people in this line of work are generally quite empathetic people, but I was particularly sensitive to like people's traumas and things like that, and it took me a long time to develop just a thicker skin of just dealing with these sorts of things, because sometimes I'd finish sessions with young people, or with concerned others, so their parents or grandparents, and I would literally just cry, just because at the end of the day we are just human, and if we were completely desensitized, I think it wouldn't help with the approach and the way that we communicate with the people that we work with. But over the years I've definitely developed more of a thicker skin, I would say, which I kind of appreciate, and it's helpful, but also I don't like it at the same time, because I hear about situations that are quite traumatic, and I'm just like, it's just like, oh, it's just like another day in the office, so a part of me, I don't like it, but also I think to be in this sort of line of work, it really does help, because it does, like, your emotional well-being does take a battering from doing this line of work, especially if you're working with a young person or family members, and then they lose their life for whatever reason. That is really, really difficult to sort of move away from. In the 7-8 years I've been doing this, I've only had that one young person that has lost their lives. But for me, like, it took me a really long time to come back from that, and I'm quite lucky. I think we all are quite lucky within Barod, because we've got quite a sort of strong team, especially with choices down here. We're all like really solid in terms of like our work dynamics, and if we have a problem, it's like a family, we like lean on each other for that emotional support, and same with our managers and stuff like that. We've got a really good rapport with them all, so I think that really helps. I think you do need a good work environment when you're dealing with like some really intense cases, for sure. It helps.
I've gone the other way. I think I was quite hardened at the beginning, and was quite resilient, should I say, in like, listening and absorbing someone's story and breaking it down and being able to digest it and deal with it. And I think as I've got a little bit older and having a family, and seeing my own my own children, family members, etc., and things that happen, I think I find it more and more challenging. And maybe is that because maybe I didn't deal with it when I thought I was dealing with it at the beginning, just by putting it in a box, shutting it down. And no, I think I definitely have less resilience than I did when I was younger. I definitely reflect more on people's experiences, and I'm not, I think it does affect me more emotionally these days. And I know a lot of people says that comes with age, that comes with age. And I think, yeah, but I'm also kind of like aware that things are becoming more difficult for people. So people are coming, and their complexities are even more complex, and the experiencing more things, and it's just like, wow, and do you know what I hold on to, right? I always think to myself, wow, you as a person sitting in front of me telling me all this, how you're managing to deal with that weirdly gives me strength, and kind of weirdly kind of makes me have a insight into how strong other people are. And in a way, I feel an element of gratitude in meeting them. They may not feel that their worth is nothing, but the fact that they are managing to deal with what they're dealing with and still go about their business, and or what they may think is, they're not coping, for me says a lot about that individual. So that's why I think those people are becoming more and more ingrained, and you kind of think about the potential of where they could be at, and worst case scenarios and all that. But no, I just think, for me as a worker in this field, those kind of stories, as much as it does kind of tug on the heartstrings, etc., it's definitely there's positives in amongst there somewhere sometimes, even in the most dire of situations. But it is this is what life is at the moment, and
What would you say are the best things about like your role? You may have already said it, but like, Dan, for you, like, what would you say when you think about your job and what you do? Like, what are the kind of main things that you tend to like reflect on in terms of from the positive and aspects of your role?
I think, when I think about my role, but also my duration of and how far that I've come on a, a professional level, but also on a personal level, like the thing that I admire the most is the challenges that I get faced with in work, because I think it builds a lot of character. And, like everybody's said already, getting inspiration from these people of, how difficult their lives have been, and how they deal with that really helps you to, have a newfound respect for people and how they manage, really difficult situations. And I think there's good and bad things that come from that. Obviously it can, be quite challenging and quite heavy, but also just pulling on, the positives and how these people are like getting through their day-to-day lives. That is like really, really inspiring. And every single young person I work with is completely different, and they're all hilarious in their own way, shape or form. They have such positive elements to them. And I think, I said it earlier as well, I think if we can bring humor into work with some young people, obviously, not all young people, they find it difficult to sort of come to that level, but sometimes just bring in that little bit of an element of like laughter and humor, it really does help a lot. And it does give me a lot of inspiration and just like a lot of personal growth, I think, that helps me in my own personal life. But also when I have another referral come through, I feel like every time I'm getting more and more equipped with sort of life experiences that I've witnessed and heard of these young people going through. So it is just the young people I work with. They're hilarious, and they're such, like I said, just inspirational people to work with. Sometimes it's been really hard, and some young people don't like me, and that's fine, because at the end of the day, we can't get along with everyone. But also, if we do come to that case where a young person, you're not just gelling with them, then it's just like, it's cool. We can look at sort of alternative ways, or getting another worker as well. And sometimes that can be a little bit like, oh no, they didn't like me, and then that can be a bit of a damage to the old ego. But it is what it is at the end of the day. So, but yeah, that is literally probably my highlight of my job is the young people that I work with, for sure.
Dan, I'm quite surprised you haven't mentioned me.
Oh yeah, sorry. That was the second favourite.
Oh yeah, no, sorry.
Jamie has Big Smoke up in Swansea. Yeah, he's an inspiration to the work that I do. Thanks, Jamie.
Funny joke.
He needed an ego boost there, didn't you, Jamie?
Yeah. It worked. Thank you. Really
Cool.
appreciate it.
Mae'n iawn.
What was the question again, Rob?
You're getting too distracted by yourself again, Jamie. Come on.
Oh.
He hadn't had a compliment in 20 minutes, so I think he was what do you think makes it like working in this sector stand out for you?
Yeah. So obviously I think having numerous different experiences and settings and working with drugs and alcohol, I think as Danielle says, it's working with the individuals that we provide those services for. Obviously the staff as well, both yourself, Rob, and Dan, inspirations, yeah.
Nice one, James. Yeah.
No, name drops. Get him in.
Yeah.
But I think as well as key is like the staff as well. Like, I've worked with numerous amount of staffs that have taught me a lot about working with people, working with me, and like there's taught a lot about myself. There was one staff member who I still hold in quite a lot. They've moved on now. They're in another role in another sector, and they're doing quite well with themselves. And their person-centered approach was phenomenal for me, and I still remember. And they had such a way with people as well, and the way in which they would deliver services peripatetically, doing outreach, doing all those things was just, for me, it showed how a service should and could be. And brought lots of different elements to it. And I think that is, it's traditional old school drugs work. It's nothing new, right? It's nothing fancy. And I hope that we never lose that as well, because people still need to work with people face to face. People need to have that option, need to have that choice. But more importantly than ever before, like, we need to be working in people's communities. And I know that comes with this nuances with regards to people not wanting to be associated or be seen to access services, which potentially is, largely stigmatized, etc. But I think it's the way of the future, and we've got to break down those barriers. And by working in people's communities, being more visible, having a ease of access, no wrong door approach, and all that, will really help people in accessing services sooner. Help with the harm reduction messaging. Get people contact with services continuously if they want it, without ever having the need to whether change their behavior or patterns around drug use, because we're a harm reduction service, and harm reduction is at the heart. I know, working with you both, harm reduction is key to our philosophies and our personal values as well. So I think that's why some of us stay in the service and stay in our organizations and work with the people that we do for so long, because harm reduction is something that we truly believe in. And obviously it's very evidence-based. We got this scientific knowledge and practices in place across the globe. But I think that for me stands out massively. And I think harm reduction, is a definite key driving point, because I still don't think it's accepted and recognised enough to this day. And it's not as if it's a new thing, is it? And I know still some people still have real challenges with translating what that means and what is actually harm reduction. And that's for everyone, that's from the lay person right through to a clinician in the field, So yeah, it's interesting, very much so.
I love having those conversations with people who don't necessarily understand or believe in harm reduction as well. I love those conversations.
Yeah.
100%.
And I love having the opportunity to actually get that message out there in terms of harm reduction and actually how it works and stuff. And I'm fascinated really by the opposition view to a degree. I am absolutely fascinated by it, and I think
it's mad, isn't it? Because it can be overcomplicated and oversimplified at the same time.
Without a doubt, the news in Scotland about drug consumption rooms obviously has come out in the last couple of weeks, and I was just reading about some of the opposition to it, and one of the Conservative MPs, I think he's a minister for policing, and he's still given that rhetoric that harm reduction and drug consumption rooms encourages drug use, which one shows we still got a way to go, in terms of winning those hearts and minds. But also, I think within this field, we have that opportunity to challenge such thinking and challenge such practice, which, I would like to think in the end, we often win in terms of implementing change, whatever that change is, to a degree on a wider scale.
Well, no, I was just going to say, is that what is kind of sticks out for you in the work that you do?
Yeah, I'm not kind of front facing anymore, and my kind of interaction with people who access our services is a lot more limited compared to you two. But I think, in terms of my role, it's relatively unique, especially to the organizations like campaigns and communications. But I think, I'm lucky that I have the platform to be able to voice the opinion of the organization and to fight, on behalf of harm reduction. And, and like I said, I love that kind of challenge of debunk those myths and kind of to challenge those opinions that actually, don't sit with the evidence. Ultimately, like Jamie said, there's an abundance of evidence for harm reduction. So, for me, I just love harm reduction. I think it's such a pragmatic way forward.
Because
you got people that's that don't agree with drug use, and they're having that argument over a pint, and it's you kind of being a little bit of a hypocrite for me. But as well, I think my experience of kind of liaising with people who access services, there's definitely been hard times. There's definitely been challenges. One that always comes to mind is when I was facilitating a smart recovery meeting. And, I'll be honest with you, my experience around drug use is now on nothing, to be honest with you, in terms of like illegal drugs. It's just never really been for me. But in this situation, there was an individual there saying, who do I think I am? Facilitating this group when I haven't got any experience. And, this person fully believed that he was, I don't mind saying it, he thought he was God's gift in terms of, supporting people, but his attitude wasn't great, and he actually got ejected from the group in the end. But he was doing more harm than good ultimately, and but there's been times when, especially in like smart recovery kind of meetings, you've had people that really want to make that change, but for whatever reason they were just unable to do so. But on the flip side, mentioning just obviously a couple of people previously that come across in my life and within the working environment, both professionally but also people that have come through our doors asking for a bit of support have been inspiring, really. And I think it's enabled me to kind of take I would say a better approach, a more pragmatic approach just to my life generally, I would say. So which and I think, again, continuing to fight the battle of trying to destigmatize just drug use generally and people that access it, because like we said, people who use drugs get such a bad rep sometimes, but actually just in one sentence, earlier we highlighted just how resilient these individuals can be and are ultimately. So
from this conversation that we've been having now, it'd be nice to have, like, hopefully someone will pick this up on the podcast and listen to it, and hopefully kind of inspire someone to look at a career, to look at maybe volunteering, or maybe even come in and speak to someone about like whatever challenges that they're being faced with. Because like we said, you've talked about stigma, we've talked about like breaking down the barriers and about the inspirational strengths that individuals that come into our services bring. And I just think, like, it'd be really nice to have, like, people kind of go, do you know what? Maybe, career in drug and alcohol use might be something of interest for me, regardless if you've got experience. I think if you've got the skills to work with people, then
definitely.
that's the starter, and everything else can be taught, learned, job, and all that. So I think it'd be really nice to see if it could be provocative to the point that you made someone go, yeah, actually this could be a goer.
Have you got job vacancies going, have you, James? Yeah.
Always. Another plug. Another plug.
How to the business.
Yeah.
Come work with us,
or
please.
anywhere else in Barod. Remember, go to the website. Work with us. That's click on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And volunteers. We're always looking for volunteers.
That's it. And I think, volunteering's a great way in, isn't it? I always think, in terms of myself, I had no experience when I started, and obviously the suit did most of it for me. I know that, but I'm hoping
we saw potential, Rob.
Yeah, without a doubt. But I think it's having those people skills
as well, or was it just a suit?
Yeah, satchel.
Yeah. Nice. Good on you, Rob. Represented in the suits.
I might try and bring that back. Maybe.
I think you're still the only person I've ever interviewed in a suit.
What?
Yeah, genuinely standout suit wearing bod I've ever met. So,
and you still remember it 13 years on?
13 years on, still remember it. Yep.
Happy days. Cool.
Obviously made an impression.
Yeah,
exactly. Cool. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jamie. And hopefully we will see you all again soon. All right. Bye-bye.